Hey folks, we're going to start in the next 20 seconds, so grab a seat and get comfortable. Okay, so very warm welcome to this, the third MSDUG United Lockdown event. It's quite a mouthful, I had to read that. My name is Dustyn Lightfoot. I'm sure those of you that have attended the Johannesburg user group over the last couple of years will know me, so good to see you on the live stream. Welcome. Some of those are the first timers from Joburg. Welcome to you too then. And also folks from Durban, Cape Town who might not have met, very cool to be joining you. And then let's not forget folks joining us internationally, and I have it on good authority there might be some, so awesome to have you too. Just a side note, if you haven't picked up on that then yet, so for the purpose of the live streaming, we've joined forces between us, Cape Town and Durban. So if you look on Meetup, you'll see that our schedule is synchronized. Will be exactly the same events, the same speakers, but obviously listed on another 3 different meetups, just as a side note. So I'm just very quickly going to go through what's happening in the community. We find that a lot of folks tell us, like just after a really cool event, that they wish they were there and can we have it again. And we know developers don't really like to read, so we have this short segment just to tell you what's happening in the coming months. So I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay. First of all, there's our illustrious team for this evening. I'm not going to go through all of them. The ones that are speaking tonight, I'll briefly introduce in a little bit. So firstly, just towards the end of the month, we have the Microsoft AI Virtual Summit. So if you're into AI, there's going to be some real authorities on AI speaking there. You might want to catch that one. Microsoft Inspire, well, you might know if you're a partner that that's on as we speak. I'm competing with Satya and Adela for your attention at the moment. So hopefully if you're a partner, you've managed to catch some of that's always an awesome event. DevRelCon, this is one I'm not too familiar with. It's a conference that helps build communities, developer relations conference, I think. Looks really interesting. It's been on for the last month and still runs for another week, so maybe check that out. .NET Conf, probably most of you are familiar with this one. So over the last few months, we've had the .NET Conf focus on Xamarin and focus on Blazor. This particular one focuses on microservices, something you may have heard of. So, what's the best way to do microservices with the latest in .NET? Should be a great conference. A little bit further on, in November, the Global Microsoft 365 Developer Bootcamp, and that's tentative. So yeah, who knows what the world's going to look like by November? But keep your eye open for that one if Microsoft 365 is your thing. And then our very own MSDUG United Lockdown event. So for August, we have a great lineup. We have Donna Sarkar from Microsoft. Should be really interesting. She champions the Power Platform and giving a talk, why do you hate flowers? So that should be really interesting and colorful. Then our very own Georgiana Young, local MVP, that's doing great work down here, talking about your JavaScript app in the cloud. And then another one that I also look forward to particularly is building beautiful apps with Xamarin.Forms by Stephen Davison. As you may know, if you build mobile apps, it's one thing building an app, but it's another thing building a beautiful app. So that should be a really good one too. September, we got Gerald Frischleis, also from Microsoft, joining us, talking about code spaces, which is a very relevant topic in the current situation too, developing from your iPad, browser, VS Code, or anywhere. followed by introduction to Docker from Quentin Barnard. And then yours truly talking about an introduction to Bluetooth low energy. So if you've ever wondered about Bluetooth low energy, how's it different from current Bluetooth or Bluetooth Classic? You know, it's not just Bluetooth Classic with less energy. So if you're interested in that, join us in September. And then obviously let's not forget tonight, we've got a fantastic lineup, none other than Mr. David Ortinau himself. So if you know the history of this user group, we started as the Xamarin user group. So Xamarin and cross-platform mobile dev is very close to our hearts, and really awesome to have David himself from Microsoft telling us where Xamarin is at now and where it's going with Maui. Very good. And then we've got some of our awesome local MVPs, Ronald Mariah talking about building serverless distributed APIs on Azure, and Pavendra Naik talking to us about Github Pages. So it should be a really fun evening. Just some logistics. So you can interact with us on the side panel. If you look at the side of your team's screen, you'll see a side panel there, and you can ask questions, and our producer, Mr. Adam Pete, will choose some of those, and the team will do their best to give you some cool answers on those. After the actual main event, there's a separate Teams event that we use for networking. So this is not the live stream event, you don't have to worry. Your mics and cameras will be enabled, so you can interact with each other and with the team if you want. And there's the link. I'll just leave it there for a few seconds, aka.ms/MSDUG networking. And then last but not least, I won't forget, we've got a sessionized page for Johannesburg and Cape Town. You can see them there on the slides. If you don't get it, you can ask us about afterwards. We're always keen to have new folks volunteering to speak. You can go and post a talk there. Yeah, please do. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Alan.
Hi. I think we're going to hand over to David, which can then kick off the actual talks. You don't want to listen to me at all tonight.
I'm excited to be here. I appreciate it. So I think you just need to make my video full, right? And then I can just take it from there.
Hey, you should be live.
Okay, it says I'm live. I'm still seeing Dustyn's desktop, but if everybody else can see us live, then that's good. So hello, everybody. How many people do we have? I can't see anybody. What's going on? So I really appreciate the opportunity to come do this from St. Louis, Missouri, here in the heartland, the Midwest of the United States. It's actually sunshine outside right now. It's about 11:15 in the morning. I've been up since 4 a.m. Yeah, so let's find out if these demos are going to crash or what's going to happen. So I got some slides, I got some demos. Really excited to kind of talk to you about what's going on, and I'm going to try to leave as much time as I can. Those of you know me know I'm passionate about this and I love to talk, but I'll try to cut myself short so that we can have some Q&A. All right, so first things first, let's go through some slides. So I'm going to be talking about building native client applications with .NET. Yes, this is what's new in Xamarin.Forms. Yes, this is what's coming next in .NET Maui, with a little bit of .NET 5, .NET 6 information in the mix as well. So never fear, the content is here. Wow, that was a horrible rhyme. I'm going to be paying for that one. Probably should get this out of the way immediately for everybody. Yes, I am wearing pants. Yes, this is live. See, I have a cup. There's my cup.
I wasn't going to ask at all.
I just want to make sure everybody knows I'm on the up and up here. This is live.
It could have been a pre-recorded.
Could have been. That's why I'm trying to demonstrate that it's all live. I can never get away with it. I guess I could dip down, but let's get back onto the content. Okay, so I am a principal program manager at Microsoft on .NET and focused on the Xamarin Mobile SDKs. I guess I'm going to have to stop saying mobile though, because we always have had not always, but for years now, we've had desktop platforms supported to a certain level, mostly from the community. But as we move into .NET MAUI, that's going to become a bigger deal. So slides, let's go to the next slide. Boop. Let's go to a demo. Enough with the slides, right? So I've got my Windows machine here, and I've got a Mac over here as well, and I'm going to put my keyboard down. I only have so much desk real estate here. Let's scoot this towards me. So I want to zoom in. Let's run this app. And while that's building and deploying, I'll talk to you just briefly about what I've got here. This is my personal finance app. There's no money in it, which is reflective. But one of the new things that we've been pushing in support of helping you develop apps faster, light up navigation easier, is this concept of shell, right? So within the shell file, you can come in here and you can say, okay, well, I want to fly out. So I'm going to add a flyout item. And I'll go ahead and wrap the content I have here, and hopefully this doesn't blow up on me, but you never know. It's okay if it does. It's just a little F5 and we're back in action. So I've got a home menu item, and I can go ahead and create another menu item here. And we'll call this one Home 2, because I'm not actually going to change the content of the home. Go ahead and save that. Should refresh my UI. There it goes. And now my flyout menu has two home flyouts. If I wanted to change this to tabs, it's as easy as doing this. Change it to a tab, change it to a tab, and now I should have 2 tabs at the bottom. I didn't practice this, but here we go. Look at that, 2 tabs at the bottom. Whoa, whoa. Pretty cool. So super easy to do. I'm going to put this back because this is actually the UI that I was creating. So that's shell. It's highly customizable in future versions. When we get to .NET MAUI, we're going to make it even easier to style some of the more troublesome bits like your app bar at the top, your tabs at the bottom. But let's move on to the content of what's happening here. And I kind of have a list of things that are new and awesome. Some of these things are coming in the next release of 4.8 Preview 2. And some of these things are already in releases that you can be using today. Preview 2 was tagged, I think, like a little over 24 hours ago. So it's going through QA. I think there might have been some build test failures, so we'll get that sorted out. That's what QA is there for, and then we'll make sure we're shipping that. But as we look at this page, first of all, I can style several things using these attached properties off of shell. So I'm setting the background color of white. The foreground is black. Of course, I could change this to like a blue, and I believe that'll change my menu item or my what do you call that thing? Hamburger. Told you I didn't get much sleep last night, right? Oops. That's Power Tools, right? Let's see. Windows key plus, and that zooms in. Oop, go away. So that changed my my hamburger there. And so I can style several things from any page. Of course, I can do this. Oh, don't do white. White on white. That's going to totally disappear. I can do this from anywhere, but of course I would probably keep my styles in a single place. Something that I don't know that everybody is aware of, and this doesn't really matter here because I'm on Android, but we do have platform specifics like this that have been added recently. Prefers home indicator auto hidden. So if you're an iOS user, you're aware that there's that little black bar that shows up at the bottom of your UI. And so if you want that puppy to go away, you just set this to true and it should go away. All right, so as we look down here at this UI, you can see firstly, the thing that jumps out at you probably is the gradients, beautiful gradients happening here on the backgrounds of these cards. And so the gradients are being handled by the new feature coming in 4.8. Linear gradient brush. We also have radial gradient brush. And so I've declared these up here as resources so that I can just use them. And if we just come down here into the into the content. I'm using it on this button over here as well, but I wanted to go to the card down here. So I've got this frame, which is my Bank of America card, which is actually a bank in America. And I just apply it to the background. Now, you may be saying, why not background color? And that's because background color would be a breaking change if we were to override that and take it over. So for the moment, this is background, and you just set it there like that, and voila, I have my gradients. Now I also have some beautiful shadows happening here, and that is courtesy of Jean-Marie, who runs the Sharpnado library, or works on / deploys of Sharpnado fame. And so that's a really nice add touch there. They're colored shadows, and so you can actually see that I'm wrapping my frame with that right here. That's available today. You can go check out that library. In .NET MAUI, we will be adding our own shadows. We do have an implementation that is done, I think, on Android and UWP, but needs iOS. There's like one of those platforms that still needs the implementation done. And we'll do it slightly differently than what Jean-Marie has here. We'll do it more like what we have here for background, where it will be something that you can apply to any view in .NET MAUI. All right, what else is going on here? So we've certainly got some shapes. So one of the shapes is up here in my, let me scroll back to the top. Right here, this geometry group. So I've got this rounded box, and so I have all of these primitive shapes that I can use. And this is an overly complex one, but I'll describe what's going on here. I wanted to have, and let me scroll down in the UI here, and I'll zoom in so that you can see, because these guys are kind of small. Yes, I know. So you see that I've got a little bit of rounding here on these. So two things are happening. First of all, I'm clipping photos with a geometry group. Awesome. And I'm composing several different primitive shapes to create this rounded rectangle that I can then clip with. And zoom back out. So what's happening here is that in each of the four corners, I have put a circle. And using the coordinates for the center, they're all 8 by 8. And so that manages the 8-pixel corners. And then I fill the rest of the space with a couple of rectangles. And then, and I actually coded this by hand. This you can use tools like Blend or Sketch or Figma or any other kind of drawing tool, and they almost all will give you SVG code. And if you just inspect that SVG file in VS Code, of course, the best editor, then you can actually look at the data there and see the different shapes, and you just translate it to XAML. Typically, it's very easy to do. If it's a really complex SVG, I'll tell you right now, and I think I mentioned this on one of the discussions on GitHub, I really don't recommend trying to translate a complex SVG to XAML. You're better off using something like FFmpeg and loading that in, or use something called Resizetizer, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. Cool, so we've got shapes now, and we can do that, and I'll show you the clipping. So image here, and I'm clipping it just like that. You just add a clipping, and you're good to go. Any shape will do. You could do, Xamagons. You could just clip them all in Xamagons, and it'll be good to go. As a matter of fact, if you look at OBS here, my video, and I'm in a little Xamagon there, it's the same concept. Cool. All right, back to my notes. What else is in here that I can call attention to? Oh, I'm using embedded fonts. So if I go over here, typically when you're doing cross-platform development, you have to go into each native platform and tell it where the fonts go, or put the fonts in a specific location, and then you have to maybe do some magic like in the info P list or something else. And it's not consistent across all the platforms, so it can be a real hassle. So what we've done now, and we'll be improving this, Font Awesome is one that's a little squirrely, but you can drop your TrueType fonts or your OTF fonts in here. You make sure that they are embedded resources. So as my property, it's an embedded resource. And then In code, let's see, I think I do it here for the icon font. You create an assembly tag. You can do this in any code file that's going to be, run by the compiler. You could do this in the assembly info CS file, which is a good place if you want to kind of consolidate everything into one spot. You tell it the name of that embedded file, and then you can give it an alias if you wish. Otherwise, you could use the name of the font as the way that you reference it. So then in my code, let's jump back to the main. Hopefully I'm not jumping around too much. Go away, Shane. No notifications. Mute. Nightlight? No, I don't want nightlight. Just don't want them to talk to me. Give me just a second. Quit. All right. So fonts. So I'm going to go to Font Awesome. And in case you're wondering how I'm navigating, it's hidden back here. I'm just using the search. And I happen to be getting lucky. So here it's the bell, which is up here in the upper right of my emulator, right next to my circle clipped profile. That's a circle clipping right there. So I just tell it Font Awesome. I didn't need to create a style for that or anything. I just tell it which font to use, and then the text of the label, I'm using this to reference the appropriate code for what that icon font is. So if we look at iconfont.bell, this is going to be in the icon font class that I was just in. It's all this stuff here. So rather than having to remember these things, I have a static class that has been created. I think I got it from Andre Nitescu's website. Icon font to code or something like that. And I know that Dan Siegel also has a NuGet package out there that bundles together like several different icon fonts that you could use in the same way, which may be easier. So I do this in a label. Of course, it's font and it's text. I could also use the new font image source functionality to do the same thing. All right, so I mentioned Sharpnado shadows, probably something that if you do a lot of grid layouts like I do, because grids are very flexible, very functional, and also pretty darn performant. So rather than creating column definitions the old school way, now the old school way, column is not going to give me IntelliSense because it sees that I already have it. Rather than doing all this stuff, right? Column definition, blah, blah, blah. Rather than doing all that, you can just do it in one nice little inline way here. I will also mention that up on GitHub, in the discussions area, there on Xamarin.Forms' GitHub repository, we now have discussions. I should just say that first of all. So that's pretty awesome. So if you are a frequent user of the Xamarin Forums, you may want to go check that out. It's also just a great place to ask questions and get answers, and I try to answer a few every week. It's brand spanking new. I think we just loaded that up like a week and a half ago. It's a beta thing from GitHub, so it's pretty cool to be able to get access to it. I lost my train of thought because I was talking about, the column row definitions. So the other thing is that grid, it would be nice to be able to say, okay, not just is it grid row 1, grid row 2, but what if I could just say grid.cell and then give it, which row, which column, how many spans, that sort of thing all at one time, and maybe even do it by name as opposed to by 0 or 1 index. So check that out. That would be cool. Also, I'm not running it at the moment, but I certainly could. I guess I could just go ahead and do this and show you that this is a shell app and it works on UWP. So many of you know that we did shell primarily as a mobile first implementation, and so UWP didn't have that support when we first released it, but now it does, and it also supports navigation, which is pretty awesome. Here it comes. Now, the one thing that is still needing to be improved here, and it's something that I could address in how I'm using the fonts, but my Font Awesome icons will not show up. There it is. Check it out. corners, shadows. Jean-Marie thought of everything. We have shadows. So very cool stuff. All right. I know everybody's applauding. Everybody's amazed. It's great. In my head, there's applause. A little bit of applause. Nice. That was almost a golf clap.
Applause.
I think that's all I wanted to show here, and I'll jump back to my slides. Oh, no. One more thing. I've got this other app running. And so this is the My Shapes little sample that I put together. And so, of course, you see that I'm using some CSS because I do have quite a bit of web background in addition to my interactive and vector animation and native development. So I am not averse personally to utilizing some CSS, and I find it to be really less verbose than XAML styles in many cases. I also like to be able just to say width and height as opposed to requests. I find that nice. Something else that is in here, which I think I've highlighted previously in other presentations, is the ability to have Xamarin.Forms specific CSS, because the thing is that this CSS here, this is legit CSS. This is not us faking CSS. These are standard real CSS properties, selectors, etc. And so we don't support all the different variations of doing selectors like first and last and nth and things like that. But a lot of it you can do, and you can do some inheritance as well. You can see that I'm doing the first child polygon of a frame. And so the horizontal options is something that I wired up using this little class here. I believe his name is Bogdan. I think I removed his name from the from this particular one. But I'm using this style sheet registrar to register my own CSS properties. And then I tell it what it maps to. So this XF horizontal options maps to visual element to this particular property here, which I just copied or something. Control Z. All right, cool. So let me run this. And this is really just showing off some different shapes. I found a cool design, did a little binging and Googling, found a cool design, and here we go. Resize. So I'm using a flex layout, so everything kind of resizes and flows nicely. And you can see that I can zoom in on this too, because I think it's worth zooming in on. I know, I'm just too slow. Ooh, that's too much. Oh, why so much? I think more like a 200 would be okay. Why you gotta be so aggressive? There we go. Yeah, so several different shapes. Most of these are paths. And so I used, I think I used Sketch for doing most of these shapes. Some of them are composite shapes, but this is all up on my GitHub. It's the My Shapes sample that's up there. This one is 4 different triangles, this square, 4 different triangles that are just put together. So if I zoom back out here, come down. Here we go. So these are the triangles that are all together, polygons. And then most of these, like I said, there's a few independent polygons like this guy here, but most of them are path drawings. And then you just apply a fill to it. That's your color. So this is the standard API that you would be familiar with if you're doing UWP or WPF. All right, cool. So I think that's good for that. Let's go back to the slides and let's move on. So I covered several of these things. I didn't show the app theme. So if you're wanting to do dark and light mode support, you're actually going in 5.0, you'll be getting that for freebies. So you may actually want to turn it off if you're like, no, stop changing the colors. But you can control dark and light. You can also do it by user preference, or you can do it by what the device prescribes. You know, because like I have my device set up that based on the ambient light and things like that, that it will change color. Pardon me while I change my HDMI to my other computer. We'll see if that works. Last time I did that, it didn't show up. All right, close that. Give my keyboard back. So you see a lot of stuff on here, and I didn't even cover everything, but this is all stuff that is now in Xamarin.Forms. And you may be asking, why put so many things in the box? Well, primarily because a lot of developers and companies were asking for it. And so we wanted to make sure that we gave you as much power as possible, that it was right there at your fingertips. But there are some things that aren't in here. You've got Stephen Thavison coming to speak and Gerald coming to speak, and they're both working on the Xamarin Community Toolkit, which is a great place for us to start moving more community effort into hosting libraries and things like that. But really, if you compare this to days, years gone by, there's so much power in the box now with Xamarin.Forms, and I think that's probably a theme that I'll continue to mention. Is just like even just this weekend building that sample that I just showed you with the gradients and everything. I was like really impressed with how easy it was to do. You saw that I was making edits and changes and things, and I was not having to rebuild. Hot reload is there for you. You can also use hot restart to do iOS directly from your Windows machine without needing to connect to a build host or anything like that. So it's really a pretty awesome new day. So some of you may be asking, well, this is all cool. What is this? How does this all work? Well, first of all, it works because it's open source, and so we have a really amazing community of contributors. As part of Microsoft, it's awesome that we have even internal people from other teams that contribute to the project. And it's all about building modern and performant apps that run on Android, iOS, Windows, and Mac. And all with .NET. .NET's a very powerful framework on which to build really high quality apps. So fundamentally, at the core, at the foundation, that's what we're all about. Now, what does this look like? I put together this slide. Ooh, let me move my mug out of the way here. I can do this. Oops, I have to move my cursor to this screen. Cursor inception. Here we go. Cool. So I put together this kind of layer cake diagram here to kind of show what really is happening internally when you make an application using Xamarin. And in this case, I'm using Xamarin.Forms. And so I'm writing my app code, right? And so this is all the UI stuff. This is all the business logic. This is my app. And I am going to be using Xamarin.Forms for my UI and Xamarin Essentials, which is our cross-platform kind of service or API library. So it's more of the non-visual stuff. So if you need to access the camera, you need to access files, geolocation, GPS stuff, opening a web browser, all those sorts of things. Xamarin Essentials is what you use. And if you're doing Xamarin development, hopefully you're already using it. And so underneath there, everything is using Xamarin Android, Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Mac, and WinUI. We're using WinUI 2.4 in addition to the other UWP things that are there. In the future, we'll talk a little bit about WinUI 3. And then, of course, all of that runs in the .NET framework. When you're running those things on Android, iOS, and Mac OS, you're going to be using the Mono runtime. And then otherwise, you're using the Windows runtime on Windows, of course. So what's really happening here? I've got some little animations. All right. So first of all, your app code is primarily going to be interacting with the Xamarin.Forms API. So this is when you say you want a button or you want a grid layout or you want to, pop an alert or whatever. You're expressing that against Xamarin.Forms. It's the cross-platform, one place, one-stop shop for you to do what you want your app to do, right? Now, in addition to that, you may find that there are opportunities where you want to go deeper into the native APIs and write .NET code directly against Android, iOS, Mac, Windows, etc. And so there's three ways in which you can do that. The first is a platform specific. I showed you one in the code earlier where I was disabling that auto home indicator on iOS only. It's an iOS only feature. So for that, something like a platform specific makes sense. The other two are effects and custom renderers. Effects can be used across a variety of different controls, and you essentially are able to go into the native control. Let's say we're talking about button. So you want to do something specific on iOS. Well, it's a UI button, and so you could write an effect that does some special CA layer shadowing or something like that. And actually, if you look at what Sharpnado is doing for implementing shadows, you can kind of see how that native code is implemented. It's very similar to what I'm describing. And then, of course, you have custom renderers, which is you essentially taking over the rendering of that control, either to add new properties to it or to override. And typically what we hear from developers is it's great to have that power, but we don't really want to have to do that very often, which is great because that's a lot of what we're working towards through all of Xamarin.Forms. And one of the reasons that a lot of those controls and features are in the box now is so you don't have to write that platform code. And then the third kind of connection in this puzzle here is Xamarin.Forms and Essentials talking directly to the platform. Now, this is all on the .NET side of things, right? So it's exercising the .NET side. It's not going down yet to Objective-C or to Java. Yeah. And so Xamarin.Forms, of course, is doing most of that work for you. And is exercising those things. When you ask for a button, it gives you a UI button and all that. Now, in addition, you may be wondering, well, how does this really happen? Because I've always thought that Xamarin was just magic, and it's not magic. It's actually just code. Xamarin is gluing to the native Objective-C and Java bits through bindings. And so a binding is essentially just a way of invoking the Objective-C or the Java method through an equivalent C#.NET implementation. So it's a binding. You've just made that, you've glued them together. And so the one difference being that when we express certain concepts in .NET, we don't always use the same concepts that are used in Objective-C, Swift, Java, Kotlin, etc. So it gets .NETified. Cool. So that's kind of just a simple explanation of what's really happening here. And so when we say native, we really are literally native. So there's no magic, no funny business going on there. Well, there might be some funny business, but that's just for fun, for giggles. All right. So what is happening in terms of ecosystem? Is Xamarin growing? Is it stagnant and stale? All signs point to growing. So that's really exciting for us. We've been putting in a lot of work over the past several years. And by the way, Xamarin at large is like 9-10 years old. And then Xamarin.Forms as a product is 6 years old. So pretty awesome that it's not only stuck around, but is continuing to see growth. So of course, among .NET developers, it's as a whole ecosystem buying into .NET, enjoying building with Visual Studio tools and all the things that come with it, that continues to be a growth area. In terms of Xamarin.Forms itself, we've seen 34% increase in contributions to the repo, which is tremendous. And of course, that's one of the reasons that you see so many open issues and so many open pull requests, is because just the sheer volume of eagerness to see the platform grow and succeed. In terms of developers, we are seeing 13.8, 14%-ish growth among Xamarin.Forms developers. So more and more developers are adopting it across all of the Xamarin ecosystem. About 92% at some point or another are using Xamarin.Forms. So it's heavily used. That's why you hear us primarily talking about it, is not because we're trying to make everybody use it, it's because it's what you're using. And we want to make sure it's the best experience it possibly can be. And then, of course, satisfaction. It's always nice to know that we're not just making things for no reason, but we're making it based on your feedback that we get through interviews. My job as a PM is to spend a lot of time talking to customers and finding out what you're building, how I can serve you better. So I'm really eager to get to the Q&A here in a little bit so that I can hear from you about what it is that you're hoping for or needing from us, because delivering on those things is what drives that Xamarin satisfaction higher and higher. And then if you compare the Xamarin.Forms growth to all up mobile development growth across all the frameworks, we're doing well. The numbers are slightly dated on this slide, but I think that's still a pretty good indicator. And of course, social, just, Xamarin on YouTube is growing. James Montemagno does a wonderful job of keeping fresh content up there. Man, so many Twitch channels have popped up over the past 6 months with Xamarin specific content. It's really pretty amazing, which takes the heat off me. I don't have to do so much presenting. All right, so first party apps. So people always ask, not always, to the people who care, they're like, oh, but are there any first party apps using Xamarin? Well, yes, here are a few. There are many more that are internal, and that's great. And if you look at most organizations, they depend, their business runs on technology. And so I've talked to one customer recently, and they had, I think it was 15, 16 apps using Xamarin.Forms, but they had one consumer-facing app that was not using Xamarin.Forms. And so we were asking, well, why not? Why not just go all in? And they said, well, you know what? It's a different app. It's a different need. We don't need to have all the code share and all the other benefits that we get. And besides, our business is running on .NET and running on Xamarin, so it's actually a much more important place to be in terms of supporting customers and what their needs are. So I love to be able to talk about first-party apps, but I love to more so talk about how businesses thrive on and depend on Xamarin and Xamarin.Forms to run their day-to-day businesses. A little bit more about customers. You can go check this out. Those of you who've been around a while have seen this a billion times. And so here's 1,000,001. We do have customer showcases up. We have lots of case studies in the pipeline. And so we're trying to get those vetted and published to showcase more and more of what people are doing today with Xamarin and Xamarin.Forms. So news alert, I'm going to take a little break here from the typical flow, and let's just talk about some of the current news related to Xamarin, because we've got some new things happening, right? Google has shipped their Android 11 preview, the next version of Android. It seems to be, from my take on it, and you certainly can let me know if you are an Android developer and there are certain things that you're super eager to see. It's a lot more around user experience and things that the user will just get as kind of users of the platform, as opposed to what Apple did in iOS 14 and Xcode 12, which is shipped a whole bunch of new things, or modified and improved, not necessarily improved, but ship new things. So where Android is more around kind of, I guess I'll just say Windows phoning up Android with the kind of communication stuff and bringing social up to a higher level. iOS is doing other stuff, and I'll talk about what that stuff is here in just a minute. So I did want to mention that UWP's XAML Hot Reload is coming soon. Have seen demos. It was on the Visual Studio roadmap. I heard it got unfortunately accidentally removed, which may have caused UWP developers some consternation. Never fear, it's coming. I mentioned Resizetizer, and so I just wanted to put a plug here for that. This is from John Dick, who works on our SDKs team. And so he has created this package that will generate the different densities of images across Android, iOS, Windows, and I think he does Mac as well, and maybe even WPF in there. And so essentially, just like I did with fonts, you embed the resource and you set it up as a shared asset. And then you can go into your CS Proj and you can tell it what size or sizes you want. By default, it will generate the right sizes and it will detect the original size. But if you need to tell it of a different original size, you can do that. It's the basis for some things that we're going to be bringing directly into Xamarin.Forms and Visual Studio. So highly recommend you looking at that. So some of the things that Apple announced in iOS 14 and Xcode 12, of course, it's the new iteration of Catalyst. Catalyst is the ability to take your iOS, iPadOS, as the marketing team likes to call it, and deploy it as a macOS desktop application. It does light up some other APIs for windowing and menus and things like that. And it looks super easy on the surface, and so I think a lot of iOS developers are very eager to have it, and I'm certainly eager to use it. But it actually is an entirely new architecture platform to target. So there are some wrinkles around being able to support this. It's not as easy as it looks. But we are going to be considering this in our next wave of work and be looking towards how we can best support this for those of you who want to take your iOS apps and light them up as desktop apps on the Mac. Widget Kit is the ability to add these larger widgets on the iOS home screen. And so this is all Swift UI based stuff. We have a prototype that we've put together, and I think it's probably the way in which we're going to propose going with this. And that's for you to write the widget UI bits in Swift UI using Xcode. And then we'll provide a bundling mechanism and a messaging library for you to be able to communicate with your host app written in Xamarin iOS, Xamarin.Forms, and pass messages back and forth and just deploy it all together. So that seems, it's very similar to the way other frameworks do this. And it will probably be the most flexible and powerful for you as developers when you do need to support something like Widget Kit. It's one of those things that gets a lot of press because it's a good marketing thing. From what we have seen, that is not a high traffic area in app development. So putting a ton of effort into something that not a lot of people end up using wouldn't be wise. App clips is the ability to have a very small iteration or version of your application that people can load instantaneously by RFID proximity or by snapping a QR code. And then they can upgrade to the full app. Those of you who are Android developers are familiar with this. I think it's, what are they called, quick apps or something like that. And so this is something that we may also take a similar approach to what we've done with Widget Kit, or what we're thinking to do with Widget Kit, but we'll see. So these things are all under consideration. We want to know really from you as developers, are these things that you have business use case for, demand from your customers, demand from the company that you work for, or from yourselves? How can we support you in that? And then watchOS, similarly, we're considering how we can best support this moving forward and provide you with the best experience that you can rely on. All right. Woohoo! So that is a bit of where things are today. Now I'm going to jump for a little bit into the future. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to see if I can't get my Mac running here, and we're going to do another demo. So let's go to desktop. Yes, it's black. Why is it black? I think I might know why it's black. Not just because it's like, oh, sweet, it works. Oh. I was a little panic there for a moment.
Time for more applause.
All right, so how about we create an app? So I'm going to show you some .NET Maui, and so I'm going to do this from the command line. So first of all, let's see, I've got a bunch of things in here. So I'm going to do ride the wave. There is no ride the wave now. Cool. So we're going to do .NET New. Those of you who are ASP.NET Core developers or core developers or whatever you call, whatever those developers are called that use the command line, we're going to do this. So we're going to do .NET New Maui. So this is going to create a new template, and I'm going to give it a name, Ride the Wave. So this is going to scaffold out a new project for me called Ride the Wave. Cool, cool, cool. System.Maui app was created successfully. Awesome. It only took 7 seconds, which I like even more. So let's go into the Ride the Wave folder, and I'm going to do a NuGet restore. And then once that is good to go, I'm going to open this puppy in your favorite editor, VS Code, right? All right. so let's first of all get oriented here. So let me scoot this over a little bit. Taking up too much space. And then there we go. All right, cool. So let me zoom in here. So I've got a couple of things here. This is probably very familiar to you if you have done any amount of Xamarin development. I've got my library project here. And then I've got an iOS and an Android. We call them head projects. These are the platform projects. So I'm going to be running this on iOS. I don't need to do anything for that to work. Within here, I've got a very small, this is just the hello world type app, right? So I've got my main. We'll zoom out a little bit. So this is my main page. And so this is using our Fluent API for describing your application. So this is based on Comet. If you've seen the Comet experiment from James Clancy, we're taking that inspiration and saying, how could we make this look for .NET Maui? And I will get to other development experiences here in a minute, but I'm kind of giving you the full throttle look into the future of what we're doing. So I can go ahead and run this. I'm going to go Command Enter. I'm going to pick my iPhone 11 and I'll use the 13.5 version. And I guess I just covered my emulator. Oh, I'm zoomed in. That's the problem. Did I mention I didn't sleep a lot? All right. So probably the first thing to note is that we have a debugger working. So this is pretty cool. So if I start hitting my counter down here, you can see that I hit the breakpoint. I can inspect some things typically from over here. I'm not much of a debugger. I probably should learn to do better. So I'll go ahead and continue on. You can see that my value 1 is over to the side there. Let me go ahead and bump that count up a few more times. 7, favorite number 7. So here's my label. And actually, let me see if I can't. Editor font. Zoom in. Should have done this earlier. Apologies. All right. A little bigger, maybe more. All right. And so I can go ahead and just change my alignment here. I'm going to center it because it's where it ought to be in the first place. And then it just automatically centers it. So I've got full hot reload working here. I've got the debugger working. I can see everything that's happening here in my console. So very useful. And then let's go ahead and just bump that. You can and notice that when I hot reloaded that guy, nothing changed in terms of my state. My state was retained, so I can go ahead and bump that up to 64. It's still 11. Pretty cool. So I'll do the, I'll kind of show you some of the same UI that I used at the build conference in our session. I'm going to add a couple of new things here. So I showed you gradients before in XAML. Let's go ahead and create some gradients here. So I've got a little code snippet to create my gradient. I'm going to go, what is it, command period, and I'll start resolving some of these guys. System drawing, and then the color, alias that. So some of these types and things will be realigned as we merge into .NET 6. So as I'll mention here in just a bit, but I'll go ahead and give you the sneak preview. Xamarin.Forms namespace is moving into the system namespace. So system.maui is where we are destined to be. So that's pretty cool because that means that we are literally part of .NET at that point. I am going to get rid of the body here, and the body tag is there, and some of these implementation details will very likely change. So don't get too hung up on exactly the syntax and etc. Definitely give us your feedback, but don't feel like we've committed too much to these things. We are having planning meetings, and we'll be having more of those online in the open. All right, so rectangle. All right, so I think that resolves everything, and I can go ahead and fire that back up. Relaunch. You can see how fast this builds. It's pretty stinking fast. Also, this app is really tiny. for those of you who care about app size. So app size, app performance, all things that we are focused heavily on for .NET Maui, or at least I am. I'm certainly pushing, rooting. So all right, cool. So I've got a new UI, and I am going to run 10 miles this month, which is a really, really low month. For those of you who are runners, you're laughing right now. But let's change this a little bit, and I'm going to ride waves. This is much more on brand for .NET Maui, right? And then let's go ahead and add a new button. And let's call this one Chill Out, because I'm being too aggressive. And then I'll just go ahead and get on my state for my count. It's this guy up here, my state integer. And then I'm going to decrement that. And then I just need to add my comma to resolve that. And now I've got, now I can start going back the other direction. And it's a really nice, fluent experience. You know, you pretty much, I was thinking about this yesterday, and this is just, I don't know, it's probably a dad joke of some kind. But you know, we're all .NET developers, or we call ourselves .NET developers. I think I'm just a dot developer. I just like to hit dot and just chase whatever is in the list here. So I do this, and I go, okay, well, let's set a frame of, and I'll go ahead with height of, make it a little bit smaller. Whoops, height of 44 this time. And then, yeah, sure, let's go give that margin of 30. And then, yes, fill horizontally. And then background color. And I'm going to give it the background color of white. So I need to give it, whoops. See, I'm just hitting dot all day long. Dot, dot, dot. And I'll set the foreground color to purple. And then, oh, but I want rounded corners. So give it a rounded border with a radius of, to match, I should match, shouldn't I? 20. All right, there we go. Little circle. Now I've got a couple of those. And if I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's go ahead and comment this out. And we've got it there. So, you know, I think it's a really nice, fluid experience. And so this is one of the ways in which we're looking to light up VS Code with C#. And you may be saying, well, what about XAML? Well, we don't have XAML syntax highlighting and parsing in VS Code today. So C# first is really, it makes the most sense for us to kind of develop this experience using that way of doing things. Cool. So that was that. Let me jump back over to my slides. I'm sure there's mad applause happening right now. Alan's gonna applaud for me, right? Thank you.
Sad.
All right, let me back that up so you can see the animation again. So what is this all about? Where are we going with all of this? So this is really all part of the One.NET vision of unifying all the different pieces, right? And we've always known that we are part of .NET. I mean, Microsoft acquired Xamarin 4 years ago. And so, you know, we're part of Microsoft, but still there's a perception that Xamarin is kind of just this extra thing. It sits on top of, or is kind of an auxiliary thing to .NET, and that's not the case. And so part of this is unifying all of that into .NET. But this also means that we're using the same SDK, a single SDK. It's one base class library. It's a unified tool chain. And as you just saw with the demo that I did from VS Code, that is the same experience you would have if you were doing ASP.NET Core, or if you're doing any .NET Core, or anything that's supported right there with the command line plus VS Code, and you can do it all. And so we're working on lighting all of that stuff up for Xamarin. And of course, once we do that, we're not going to be calling it Xamarin anymore because we're part of One.NET. So it's now all .NET. So cross-platform native UI, cross-platform web UI, all the cloud native cool stuff that's happening, and all of the improvements across the board in terms of size, speed, full diagnostics. We'll be able to utilize all the same profiling and debugging tooling that the rest of .NET is using. So very excited about that. And this unification is not like a one-time thing, like a boom, it just happens. It's starting with .NET 5 and the work that's happening there, and it will continue on into .NET 6. So we will be catching that wave as time progresses, and I'll talk more about timelines in just a bit. So what is .NET Maui? Well, it is the multi-platform app UI. We don't really want to have to say that. That's a big mouthful. So let's just say Maui. .NET Maui is the way to go. And it is for both mobile and desktop. So and like I said, we've had desktop platforms in the box before. So what's the difference now? The difference now is we're saying that based on customer demand, customer need, we want to give it more attention and bring it up to the same level of polish that the mobile platforms have, and really taking the entire thing to the next level. And so improving it all along the way, driven by your feedback. So you can deploy to multiple devices. We're going to introduce a single project experience, which we're continuing to vet with customers. And if you're interested in that, we can set you up for a lab study and we can talk more about it. And so we're targeting .NET 6 for .NET Maui. It is an evolution of Xamarin.Forms. So the comfort I want to give everyone, if you are a Xamarin.Forms developer, all of that experience, all of that knowledge, all transitions, all that code you've written, you bring it all with you. We're not leaving any of it behind. It might need to change a little bit, but we're going to help you with that too, with migration tooling, changing to SDK style projects and other things. So this is really all about creating beautiful UI native on any device. You can go up to the GitHub that's there, github.net Maui. Right now, it's primarily discussion. It's almost exclusively discussion. And so in the coming releases, once we get Xamarin.Forms 5 out the door, then the attention will be shifting much more heavily to that repository, and we'll be doing some synchronization of issues across them. Oop, I forgot my Maui bot. Oh, you can't see the Maui bot because I'm hiding it with my Xamagon. Maui bots and Xamagons, there you go. The Maui bot in all of his glory. And we didn't even have to create that Maui bot on the surfboard doing the surfs up thing. That was just in the branding guides. So I think it was destined to be. All right. Couple more slides here. So hopefully there's tons of questions coming in, and I will open up the questions chat here and start addressing them soon. So as I mentioned, the namespace is changing. So this is all baked into the system namespace. Xamarin Essentials is also coming into the system namespace. Some of these details may shift and change, but this is kind of what we're thinking. The file new experience is file new multi-platform app UI. And then you can just deploy it to whatever you need to deploy it to. Android, iOS, Mac OS, Windows. Linux is also an option for those of you who really like Linux. There is the GDK Sharp backend for Xamarin.Forms today. And so it is a community contributed thing and community supported. So we will certainly be there to help anybody who wants to bring that forward into .NET 6 support. It's really not so much a matter of whether .NET Maui supports it. It's more a matter of .NET 6 supporting it for all the features that it brings to the table. And then I mentioned the CLI. You saw me use the CLI for Maui. The same thing applies for Android and iOS. The reason there's no mention of Android and iOS in the namespaces is because everything that is in Android and iOS is a projection of what is in the native library. Again, these are bindings. They're not adding new things. So there's no namespace to be changed. It's UI Kit, it's Cocoa, it's etc. So Watch Kit. All right. So if you've been using XAML and you love MVVM and it's been really good to you and you enjoy using it, never fear. It is absolutely still core to what .NET Maui delivers. We still recommend it. We're not backing off on that one bit. Just because you see some other experiences that we're exploring is not that there's anything at all wrong with using XAML. And this is a proven way of building applications, been around for so long. And that's a good thing. That's a stable thing. That's not a stale thing. So that's all still there. You can totally use it. If, however, you're looking forward to exploring some different ways of doing things, you saw what I did with the Fluent MVU-inspired, Comet-inspired way of doing UI, all based in VS Code in an emulator or a device, and you're off to the races. A little bit more kind of hands-on, perhaps, less of the full IDE doing things on your behalf. But for a lot of developers, that is something that we've heard you really are eager to have and that you would like to have. So we're excited to do this. I myself personally like to do a variety of different ways. So I'm happy in all of these camps. So you see that this is marked as experimental at this time. So we're continuing to push on this and see where you would like to see it go. Yes, we're looking to be innovative here, but we are doing so with your influence and with your guidance. And I just am seeing that my Xamarin is now. I can just keep. I just love that I can just move myself wherever I want to be. It's kind of like superpowers. All right, just stay there. All right, a couple more. So Blazor. It's a red hot thing happening in the web development community. And so Razor templates are a nice way, almost a XAML feeling way of describing your UI, but you can also blend code in there. I find that this either makes you really happy or makes you feel really dirty. But that probably depends on what your experience has been with XAML and Razor syntax and things like that. But this is a project that we have been experimenting on for a few months now called the Mobile Blazor Bindings. And as part of that, we have actually stepped into a new experiment, which is Blazor Hybrid. It's part of the Mobile Blazor Bindings. And really, we should just call it Blazor Bindings at this moment because it's built with .NET MAUI / Xamarin.Forms backing. And so the cool thing here is for whether you're doing MVU with the Comet way of doing things, or you're using XAML and MVVM, or you're using reactive UI, or you're using, I just saw this other project out there. What is it called? Web Atoms, which is basically using TypeScript JSX to use Xamarin.Forms, which is really stinking interesting. Or you want to do something hybrid like this, where you are literally blending native UI at the top, which these are, that's a UI label, or actually, I guess this is a WPF app maybe. So text block and button over there, and then everything in that orange box is all web UI. But all using Blazor components, all using the same Razor style of development, not running on a web server. It's all embedded, so it's a full hybrid app. No matter which path is right for you, for your project, for your team, for your application, the same control toolkit and the same .NET is running it all. And so our investment, sometimes developers will say, I wish you would just do one thing. Well, the one thing we're doing is .NET MAUI, the control toolkit. That's the one, that's the foundation that empowers and lights up all of this stuff. .NET, the framework, is the one thing. But within there, we know from talking to developers, I've surveyed this, I've talked to so many developers. There's no one way to describe UI. Even one developer will give me two to three options. So it's kind of interesting. I'll mention real quick that we're also doing this experiment for a single project. So as you've seen in all of my demos, I had multiple projects in there. Wouldn't it be cool if you could just consolidate that down to one? You just really want to worry about your code and only go into the native platforms when you absolutely have to. So why kind of create that cognitive load when you don't need to? So here I have a single project. I've got my SDK style project out there. And then I have my iPhone, I've got my emulator, I've got my Windows targets. All the targets that I have told this app I'm interested in are available to me. And I don't have to worry about going in and looking at different XAMLs or different implementations of app delegates and things like that. But then when I want to do something that is more platform specific, or do things like bring code in, or fonts or images, then I have a way to do that. And you can see that some of these things are just kind of building patterns around things that Xamarin.Forms has brought to the table, the embedded fonts, the resizetizer work, and things like that, and making these first-class citizens. And then when you do want to do something at the platform level, let's take advantage of multi-targeting. So this is actually similar to the pattern of how we're going to be reorganizing the source code for .NET MAUI to really get rid of the millions of folders that make it really kind of unwieldy to get up and going and understand where things are. And we're going to clean all of that up and take advantage of multi-targeting and, of course, the new versions of C#, et cetera. So what are we talking about from a roadmap standpoint? So August of 2020, we'll be shipping 4.8. So it's in preview now. New preview is coming out with the new gradient support. That's going to be very exciting. October of 2020, we're going to ship Xamarin.Forms 5. Now, the primary thing that you're getting in Xamarin.Forms 5 is we are stabilizing. So this is a stabilization release. There's no new features that should be going into Xamarin.Forms 5. This is really just taking the experimental flags off of all the features that we've been working on and kind of been doing as previews in previous releases, and providing a nice stable release in October. And then in November of 2021, we'll have a Xamarin.Forms, probably 6, and this will be our long-term service release, because November of 2021 coincides with the Maui GA. We'll start previewing Maui in November of 2020, so in just a few months. And so the early previews will probably be code only, and you'll need to build it yourself. But we'll see, you know, just how everything shapes up. I'm already putting together my demos for .NET Conf and working on articles and all those sorts of things. And so definitely pushing to have as much kind of that we can put into your hands as possible. But the reality is that, of course, the core .NET team is working on shipping .NET 5. So having the runtimes and everything you need for .NET 6, they'll need to maybe take a holiday and then come back and we can work more closely on that. So then what is the next milestone? The next milestone is really November of 2022. And pardon my poor design skills here, but I'm trying to show that really by November of 2022, this is where you want to be all on .NET, all on Maui. Because at that point, Xamarin.Forms is not going to be shipping any additional releases. It's on .NET Framework. So it's not on .NET 5 or .NET 6. If you want the latest .NETs, by .NET 7, you will have been at least 3 versions behind. So the good news is, like I said, we're going to make it super easy for you to make that transition. Of course, greenfield apps, brand new apps, no problem. You just get started with .NET MAUI when we're shipping it. But for your existing projects, we'll have a migration. Everything you've written should still work. Your custom renderers will make sure that those still work. But there are some other renderer things that we hope you'll take advantage of that will drastically improve your performance and your app sizes and things like that. So by November 2022, you want to be all moved over. It's a 2-year transition window, so that's pretty good. And so during that period of time, up through November of 2022, Xamarin.Forms will continue to receive priority fixes. So certainly security fixes, which we don't really have much of, but could happen. Crashers, runtime things, memory leaks, those things that are high priority type things, will continue to be addressed in Xamarin.Forms, and contributors are more than welcome to continue submitting fixes to issues. However, any new controls, new experiences, new features will be landing in .NET MAUI. And so, of course, like I said, you'll start seeing that in November of 2020. For both of them, we are shipping every 6 weeks. So it's a pretty awesome cadence. For some folks, it may seem like a lot to keep up with, but hopefully we're communicating as clearly as we can. More frequent releases also means that it's a little less to digest all at one time. And then, of course, things just continue forward. Every year a new .NET, every year a new C#, every year a new Maui. Cool. So with that, I am done with slides. I want to go to the questions because I'm tired of hearing my own voice. All right, a couple of questions here. Whoops. Should I look at the published? Ooh, it looks like Matthew's been in here answering questions. Good, good, good.
Yeah,
Maybe I don't
Matthew's
need to do
been very busy, but there's quite a few questions.
All right, so I am going to look at the top. I'm going to sort by most liked in case that means that the most important ones show up there. That's how our leadership team does it. Let's see here. For that geometry group, are there any best practice recommendations like performance gotchas? That is a great question. I don't have a good answer to that, seeing as how we kind of just got it and started using it. But given the fact that these are things that have existed for quite a while in WPF and UWP, I would kind of first lean on those as ways to kind of gauge performance concerns, if any, and kind of learn best practices. And certainly welcome anybody to do some benchmarking on these things and let us know. We have some tests that we have, of course, we have lots of UI tests. And I know that Matthew, as we all saw on Twitter last night or yesterday morning or whatever time zone that was, Matthew, was doing all kinds of C# performance tests. So perhaps he could help us with that. Let's see here, Matthew, CSS. So he's posting links to all my stuff. Awesome, awesome. Robbie, I use dark theme, however, I get a jump between page navigation. It seems that the page resizes and blinks white. It's not a huge issue, but just reduces the app's credibility. Yeah. Any ideas? Certainly figure out where that white's coming from. So there is a new live visual tree in Visual Studio. I don't know exactly which version. Maybe it's 8.7 and 16.7. That would be a good way to kind of inspect your UI hierarchy and figure out where that might be coming from. Debug rainbows might be helpful there too, but I would, want to know where that white's first of all coming from. And then during that transition, if you can figure out, why it's not just smooth. I'm assuming that you've tried release builds. It's not just a debug thing because your performance will be drastically different for a release build. So I would definitely confirm that there, which I imagine you probably have. So if all of that doesn't really point you to an obvious thing, certainly open an issue up on GitHub with some kind of a reproduction that we can investigate. We've seen similar reports in the past. But I don't think they were directly related to dark mode. All right, scrolling. What emulator? I was just using the Android emulator. I might have gotten that emulator from Android Studio. That was not Reflector right there. I do have Reflector, however. Running on all of my machines to show my iOS. Definitely recommend Reflector, but that's just a screen mirroring thing. William, when we get to .NET 5 or 6, will Maui also work on Linux? So I kind of answered that in terms of what the Linux story is. We are not going to prioritize Linux from the core team standpoint. We've got a lot on our plate to deliver Android, iOS, Mac, and Windows at the high quality that we're shooting for here. So I'll welcome all contributions to the Linux side of the project. And that may certainly change in the future as we continue to see Linux interest and customer opportunity. I definitely know that we have customers today actively using Linux in the field, so that's pretty encouraging. Where does Blazor fit into this framework? Yeah, so I think it's really in terms of what the developer and the development team's skill set is and their preferred way of doing mobile development. If you're a web developer, then I would steer people towards Blazor. And if I'm talking to somebody with client app development or somebody brand new to the platform, I'm going to steer them towards .NET Maui. Somebody new to the platform, I'll steer them towards the MVU, and that may end up being the C# first experience that we promote in our docs for new developers, because it's the least number of concepts you need to kind of get your head around to be successful. And then for developers who have client app experience, XAML and MVVM is a great way to go, and any of the combinations of things that you might do there, like reactive UI and things like that. So that's kind of how we think about it in terms of who are we speaking to, because like I said, I would love to be able to come out and say, here's the one way to do things, and it's going to work great for everybody. The reality is we have 1.5 million plus whatever new developers in the ecosystem, and I guarantee you they don't all come with the same background, same preferences. So how do we address that in a way that makes sense and doesn't fragment the ecosystem? Will all libraries work with Maui, i.e. Essentials? So because these are .NET 6 things, those that are non-UI things just need to rebuild against .NET 6. And we will provide guidance as to what that needs to look like. How you upgrade a library to support .NET 6. If it's a UI library, then the namespace will have to change, just like migrating an existing app project. The namespaces will change. If any names have changed, any deprecated APIs, you want to make sure that you've taken care of those things. Keep your code up to date, and then everything will just recompile and work fine. We're also looking at some of the cool things that Matthew did, or maybe Matthew's looking at, or we're going to make Matthew look at some of the cool things he did with Android X, and see if we can't use some of that nice magic as a kind of a migration step. If you experience going from Android support libraries to Android X. Will Xamarin support Huawei OS? Yeah, that's another one of those, kind of like Linux, not really on the roadmap. But we certainly are open to, and we'll continue watching, because like I said, this is all driven by customer feedback. Yeah. Faster releases, cool. Hello, Roloff. I'm so.developer. It's not just me. Yes, I'm a Google developer because I Google my answers. I'm a .developer. Cool. I think I busted through them all. Were there more questions, Alan, that came in while I was going down that list?
I think you covered them all.
Do you have any questions, Alan?
I don't. You've covered all of them. But I do have to disagree with you. You said in the beginning that Xamarin is not magic. I saw loads of magic today. Yeah. Context, definitions. I get it. Yeah, I'm really excited with where things are. I've long time been an advocate before I even joined Microsoft, and so my courage and my enthusiasm is clearly not diminished, despite not sleeping very much last night. Miguel, were you running a Mac VM, or was the demo actually on a Mac? That was my first machine. Is a Dell XPS running Windows 10. My second one is a new Mac. Yeah, new MacBook Pro. So not running in a VM, not a Hackintosh. Cool. I've taken up enough time, I think. I think we've
covered ready for the next session? Yeah,
but thank you very much, and thank you for not sleeping on our behalf. and we need applause. There we go. But thank you very much for spending time with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is really great. I appreciate you organizing this, and I hope to hear more from everybody who is watching now or later, assuming that it's being recorded. It is being recorded. I see the red dot.
It is being recorded, yes.
Awesome. Cool.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And yes, have a good nap. Okay, I think we can switch over to Ronald. Is Ronald ready for session?
Yep.
We're going to be switching. Yeah. We're going to switch over now to some serverless content.
Oh, just getting stuff ready.
Wasn't the Xamarin stuff also serverless because it wasn't in the server?
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Ronald Maria. the newest MVP in South Africa, awarded in February. So it's nice to be here at a joint conference with you guys. Let me just share my screen. Cool. So my name is Ron Maria, Microsoft Azure MVP from Durban. You can find me on Twitter at Ron Maria. So for today's talk, I just want to talk a bit about serverless applications on Azure and in general. What exactly is serverless? Because we all heard of the concept and it's like a buzzword of today. Just move this across. And since it's a buzzword, it's not really clear what exactly is serverless and how can that be if we have APIs which traditionally run on like a brief history. APIs normally run on bare metal hardware or virtual machines, and how can that be serverless? Because our code needs to run somewhere, and how can it run without a server? So a brief history is that APIs run on bare metal hardware or virtual machines, and the problem with that is it's tough to maintain, because if you have virtual machines, you need to maintain the operating system, the framework that's installed. You have to also cater for load balancing if you're running a very public service. For example, like on a Black Friday event, if you have a website running on servers, then you have to maintain the load balancing and availability. So what does that look like today? So today we have highly distributed applications across multiple regions around the world. Our code runs on Microsoft's platform. In this case, it's Azure. And the cloud provider, which is Microsoft, maintains the underlying infrastructure. So you don't have to maintain the operating system, the patches on the OS. A lot of the responsibilities are shifted onto the cloud provider. You are only responsible for the code and the deploying of it. So your applications remain available on your cloud provider's platform. So a lot of the time that we used to spend maintaining infrastructure, that time can now be better used to building our applications, because that's what we really care about. We want to build things for customers and our users. I don't have a lot of slides, so the next will just be demos. So I'm going to switch to for today's talk. The demo that I'm going to show is Azure Static Apps, which is been released in preview in the last month or so. So it's a new way of deploying serverless applications. So before Azure Static Web Apps, how we would deploy serverless applications is you'll have your code running in, for example, if you have your Angular application with a backend on Azure Functions. So you deploy it as separate things. You either deploy it as static code on Azure Storage blob, or deploy your Azure Functions in a Azure Functions app. What Azure Static Apps does is it combines both of them and deploys them as one entity. So both your backend API, which is Azure Functions, and your front end in Angular would be as one object that you deploy. So in this demo, there's not going to be any magic copy pasting. So most of it is going to be done by hand, and I hope everything just works. So there's nothing in this folder. Also going to be using VS Code for a lot of things. So what exactly is part of this Azure static app? So we have an Angular app. There's also React and Vue and Svelte. But I'm not going to be focusing too much on those front ends. Just for today, it's the Angular app that's important, and the API. So if we have to switch, get another tab, clear that. npm install the front end. While that's happening, start my Azure functions in the background. Need to switch directories. Where am I? So my backend is running on Azure Functions. I have 3 endpoints: a post, put, delete, and my just npm start for running my front end. So when this is done, a browser will open with the front end. So here we have a basic application. You can see there's no data here yet. That data is actually stored in a static file, which is in my Angular app. There is a, try and find it, API shared product data. So at the moment it's just static data, but further down in the line with the demo, I'll change this to Cosmos DB. But for now, just running it locally, the data is here in this static file. So what we ideally want is we want our products to be shown on this first page. So if we switch back to the command line, we'll see that we only have 3 endpoints: the delete, put, and post. So we'll need to add a get method. So doing that is easy. So on the command line, we'll just go Azure Functions, create a new endpoint. It'll be a HTTP trigger called products get, just to be in line with the other endpoints that we have. The authorization level. So what type of authentication do we want for this Azure function? Do we want anyone to be able to call it? Function authorization means that your caller needs to pass in an authorization code or an admin level system token that needs to be passed in. We'll keep it as anonymous for now. Just gonna clear up all this. And so for our get method, just gonna call data and require from the shared directory, and we get our, what was it called? Shared product data. These are always. Just want to make sure that, yeah, product data without the JS. And just do a try. I know the exact method because it's in product data. If we look at the so there is a get products method that I'm calling for getting the products, which is in here. And let's start result. Is 200, return the JSON object of products. So 500 if it is an error. So once that's done, because I'm still running it, let's see. Cannot find shared product data. Product dash data.
Underscore.
Yeah. As I said, there's not going to be any magic, so be prepared for a lot of errors. But we'll all be fine.
I'm ready with the applause.
Cool. Cool. So that didn't work. Why didn't it work? So if we go to here, we'll see that there's a status for a 4. So what happened is that the Angular app that's running in the front end called the API, but there wasn't any place to get to. So what exactly happened is that when I created a new function, there's a functions.json file, which describes the backend API. So there's the anonymous application, anonymous authentication that I chose. The direction it's inbound. The method that it's accept, I just want a get to be available on it. But what's not here is the route that it actually needs to handle. And that's products. So anything that comes into /API/products will eventually get here. And have a comma there. And that rebuilt. And if I refresh, that should show my products. So this isn't a very good demo because this all is static data. We'll need for production application, we'll need to get it from some database. So I have not settings, but Azure Cosmos DB emulator. So what Azure Cosmos DB is, it's a serverless database which is globally distributed across multiple regions where you can host your data. And it has a very high SLA and also a high uptime because of the SLA. So you'll have like 16 nines of availability. So the chances of your data store being unavailable is close to 0. So how do we strip the static data out of it? So if we look at our get method, we have this shared data. Also in the functions, we have our bindings. And we can have just create a new file for local settings. Just gonna add some values, and I'm gonna call this Cosmos Db connection string, and I'm gonna use that connection string. Also, because this is called by the front end, I'm just gonna have a is and false so that these settings won't be encrypted. Cool. So what we would need is, so the way Azure Functions work is that for your function to trigger, it needs to trigger on some event. That event can be a HTTP trigger. You can trigger based on a queue message being put on Azure storage queues, messages being put onto service bus. So there's multiple different ways that you can trigger your function, but you can also pass in data. So when this function triggers, we'll also need to bind it to Cosmos DB so that when it does trigger, we'll have all the data that's in Cosmos. For that, I'm just going to copy this. And in my Cosmos DB emulator, I have products already. So if you look at an item that's in the products collection, just called strawberries Cosmos DB, just to make sure that when this updates, that name will change and all these others will disappear because there is only one item in Cosmos. For us to bind it, I'm just going to get it from Azure. Which I will explain. Just want to change this to JavaScript and just get that part. And switch to here. So Cosmos DB, we want to pass it into the function, so it will change its names to products, because that's the products that we're getting from Cosmos. That's a type of input binding that we have. The database name is called web app. The collection name is called products. We'll check out the ID partition key. Let's get that from here. It'll be under settings. It's just all. So what partition key is that the way data is stored in Cosmos DB is stored in partitions. So you can have data partitioned so that it makes querying easier. For example, for products, you can have the partition key as category. So you can store all your products as by category, and when you're querying it, you query it by that category. The connection string name, which is Cosmos DB connection string, and the direction is in. for this, instead of us getting it from the static file, we'll remove that, and instead of getting it from the static file, we'll get it from the context. So context.findings, and we get our products finding. And that should just work. Switching to the wrong browser. Refresh that. So I can't find the connection string. Probably because I saved the local settings in the wrong place. API. Look, it's called Cosmos, right? Okay, I'm going to come back to this. Just move on to the Azure part. So once we have our serverless code deployed to GitHub, deploying it to Azure static apps, we'll just create a Azure static app. Choose a resource group, give it a name, call it web app, and choose a region, choose West Europe. So we'll need to get our code from GitHub and just choose the repo. And just choose the master. So we'll need to fill in a few details like app location, where exactly is our front end code. So this is in the Angular app, the API location, and the artifacts directory, which is in the Angular app and the dist folder. And we can skip this. So what this will do is that since we have our code in GitHub, Azure will add Azure Functions, GitHub Actions trigger to it. so that we have our CI already set up to deploy our code from GitHub to the Azure Static App. And we'll just wait for that. Deployment is complete. If we refresh, we can have a look at what is changed. And it's waiting for the content, which should be under actions. If everything was set up properly, which is weird. I'll try that again.
It's always fun doing live demos for preview bits, isn't it?
Yeah. Cool. I think things work when you do it twice. So now there's GitHub workflow, yeah, which shows our GitHub Actions, what it does. So it's taking our web app and uploading it to the Azure Static App. And if we go to Actions, we'll see that it triggered one new build. Cool. So while that is doing its thing, I just want to figure out why this didn't work. So we have our products, we have our Cosmos DB and our connection string. Cosmos DB connection string, and we have our local settings. Encrypted Cosmos DB. One of the there. And if we get to here, I'm just gonna share this, rerun that just to make sure that I'm not seeing the same errors from the last time. So it executed the get, returned the status code of 200, and things just work. Cool. So what exactly happened and why it didn't work is that when you add local settings, it doesn't rebuild the application. You'll need to restart the application. That's why it didn't work. So we have this now working, and we can push this to our go to static app, add it to our updates, the common commit message, and push to master because we are heroes. Git pull first before push. Cool. So when we push to the repo, your build failed because that's all Angular stuff. Angular app just please. Go back to here, and it is called go to Angular app list. Those values we can change it here. App source path. Okay, this is something else, but it's probably the configuration that I used when I created the GitHub actions. This value is probably wrong. Can change it. Maybe move that. Try that. So once that would have worked, this would have been the end of the demo. Are there any questions? Because that would have just worked. So what else can I show is that when we go to configuration, if we did deploy, there'll be environments. So environments will show your master branch that's deployed, as well as any PR branches that's also deployed. So that's one difference from the non-Azure Static Web Apps deployment from Azure Static Web Apps, where if you have a PR branch in GitHub, you can have separate environments for it. So you can, it's effectively the same as staging slots on app services, but you can have as many as you want. So you can check your changes before actually deploying to production. You can also view what functions are running on each environment. Also on the environments, you can change your connection strings as well. So if we go to configuration and on the master branch, because there's no functions, I can't really change the settings, but if something was deployed, we could add the connection string for Cosmos DB and we can use a production data store. Yeah, I think that's all that I can show. Let's go back. Yeah, instead of just waiting for this, Alan, you wanna take over?
Everything that you showed, is it available in South African data centers?
So
Cosmos DB
because
and
it's in preview, it's available in selected regions. Go back to the list. I think it's like West Europe, North Europe, probably some United States regions. So there are some other limitations as well. Static web apps. For example, at the moment, because it's in preview, the support for different platforms are low. So the Azure functions that you write needs to be in JavaScript at the moment. They don't support .NET Core. Front-end frameworks are also limited, so it's limited to Angular, Vue, and the other ones that's in the template. Yeah, also region availability is low as well, but that's just because it's in preview at the moment. So we have Central US, East US. Yeah, very limited.
Any ideas when it will move to Africa?
No, not at the moment. No ideas. Yeah,
okay,
probably.
and then I see there's a question here around Cosmos DB, and can you scale down Cosmos DB to 0? In other words, have it fully scalable to actually have no cost?
So the way the pricing works for Cosmos DB is on a per collection basis. For example, if I switch back to my emulator, so the way the pricing works is that you have your database. Let me just create a new one so you can actually see it. So the way the pricing works is on a value called RUs, which is request units. And you can set that at the database level or at the container level. So you can provision at the very least 400 request units per second for the entire database. But all collections in that database will be sharing that 400. So you can have, at the very least, 4 collections using 100 RUs, and your database is 400. So anything less than that will probably be allowed locally, but on.
Yes, you can't scale it back to no cost whatsoever.
Yeah, so once you create your database, you start getting charged for that amount of request units, whether you use that request units or not. But because it's provisioned on Azure side, you get charged for it. So you can't really scale it down to 0 unless you delete all your data.
Okay.
Yeah. Which would be a bad idea. Don't do that.
Definitely not recommended.
Yeah, but Azure Static Web Apps is free for the preview phase, as well as Cosmos DB also has a free tier. So if your app uses less than 5 gigs of data, and there's only one Cosmos DB instance in your subscription, then it's free. Yeah, so for small apps, you can run Cosmos.
Started.
Okay. Yeah.
There's another question. I don't know if you're familiar with Azure API Manager. Is there any good tutorials around it that you know of?
So there's a lot of tutorials on Azure Docs. There's quite a lot. So if you search for docs.microsoft.com/learn, this is like the destination path for anything that you want to know about Microsoft. There's learning paths for API management.
Because API Manager is quite confusing.
Yeah, so API management is more of an enterprise level way of managing APIs. So it's like a managed gateway to backend API. So you can have your microservice APIs distributed, but you have one gateway API management that manages the security and who has access to those APIs. There is a developer-focused API management that we use at Imedia. It's called Ocelot, which is a more configurable version of. It's similar to API management, but you have more configuration on it.
Like Ocelot.
Yeah. Okay. Think some about. I think I'm back. Ocelot.net. Yeah, it's a .NET Core API gateway that we use for managing the routing and the request to backend APIs, because we have a lot of backend APIs in different frameworks. So we have one in .NET Framework 4.7, and then more of a newer ones in .NET Core Azure Functions. So we're moving a lot of the functionality to Azure Functions, but we want to keep the APIs the same. So we use our gateway to just reroute requests.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but back to Microsoft Learn, there's a there's a lot of tutorials about how to use API management, and this is the one destination everyone should go to.
Okay, I'm just checking for any more questions. I think we are out. But yeah, thank you very much for the overview. It's very useful.
Oh yeah. I hope.
And then if there's any more questions, are you going to hang around for the session afterwards? Yeah. So if there's any more questions, feel free to drop by and ask Ronald. Pravendran, are you ready for your GitHub pages?
Yes, I'm ready to go.
Awesome.
And share my screen. Okay, let me know when that comes up.
You're live.
It's up.
Oh, cool.
And looks amazing. It's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, so thanks everyone for staying till the end of this session. I know it's pretty late in the evening. I've just been here standing in this conference venue waiting for my turn, and it's freezing here. I have no idea why they turn the AC up so much in these conference venues, but I'm dealing with it, and I think it's worth it. So for the last session, we decided let's keep it light. So I'm going to be talking about GitHub Pages, and it's pretty much an offering specifically to GitHub that allows you to host websites. And I'm going to point at something that I found mildly amusing. Maybe I spent too much of time on this. I saw another presentation of somebody, and they did the cool sort of layering. So we're going to be using Git on GitHub to put out GitHub Pages, and going down, it's all Git. Very cool piece of it that way. It spells out GitHub Pages. I found that entertaining. I wanted to point it out. So what's GitHub Pages? Like I mentioned, it's websites for you and your projects on GitHub. And leading on from Ronald's step, I like Bree's step. So all the stuff Ronald showed was pretty interesting. I'll go check it out later. But I've got some experience with GitHub Pages where it allows you to host static websites. So that's things like it's HTML, CSS, JS, straight from your repository. But why would you want to do this in the first place? Because, I mean, there's plenty of ways to host a website. You could go into Azure or any other cloud. You can build this website up using frameworks, Angular, and host it on a web server, right? But one of the big benefits of this, I think, especially for open source projects, is discoverability. Because when someone searches for an open source project, there's a very high probability that they'll end up in two places. They'll end up at whatever package management site that package is hosted in, or they'll end up at GitHub. And if you've got your site very easily discoverable from within GitHub repo, that's a plus for things of like documentation, or just general information for contributors who are interested in the code base. Then obviously there's usability. It's all in one site. It's a click away and you can access documentation. And then lastly, there's just a bit of credibility as well, because you have your project and then also your documentation is being contributed to in a very open way that people don't get above the money on. And then, like, honestly, this all sounds pretty cool, so it must cost a lot. But like I said, I like 3 steps to know it's free. And then the asterisk. Because obviously, nothing's free with endless tabs without boundaries. So there are some obvious usage that's put in place. And that's obviously to save GitHub, because you know, I wouldn't want to build the next Facebook and host it on GitHub Pages, and they're paying for infrastructure. That's not going to be very fair. So some of the high-level restrictions, obvious ones that affect people, is that there's only one organization/user page. So this is one that represents sort of the whole account. You can do one of those. These are cool. You can build blogs and sort of resumes if you want to, if you're an individual contributor. And then there's one page per project. And then obviously, like with all other Git projects, there's limitations on actual disk and package sizes. So the page source can be no larger than 1 gigabyte, which I think is pretty generous, because if you've got a gigabyte for a website, you are sort of going beyond the bounds of something that's free. And then there's some soft bandwidth limits. There's a limit of 100 gigabytes per month for traffic, outgoing traffic, and for the number of bulls that you have per hour is 10 bulls per hour. But I should highlight that these are soft limits, and I did a bit of searching around just before this to see if anyone's run into these limits, and these do seem to be very useful. So if you go to, I don't know, 100 gigs and 1 meg of data traffic, your GitHub page is not going to be shut down immediately. It'll send you a nice email and be like, hey, like you one of the power users, you're using a lot of bandwidth. This is a free service. Maybe think of putting a CDN in front of your website to reduce the bandwidth usage. Then there's, like everything, there's many ways to approach this, and there's varying limits to GitHub Pages. For today, like I said, I wanted to keep it simple, so we're not going to go too far. So we're going to start with some pretty simple HTML stuff with some markdown, and we'll sort of get to sort of the midpoint of complexity, where we'll look at a markdown-based blog, and sort of to the end of it, there's things like Jekyll, which is a static site generator, and there's focus data, and there's some scenarios where you can use the GitHub API and variables, but we won't go into too much detail for that. That's probably for later session if anyone's interested. And that is the end of my slides. And unfortunately, because of the whole social distancing thing, the stage and the studio where I do my demos is pretty far away. So I'm going to need like 5 seconds just to go get to my PC so I can get to the demos. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I should be back on my computer. They've put me in this little box here so you can see me while I do my demos. And like I said, I don't really have anything too complex to demo here, and I'm going to sort of go from beginner, like the simplest of this, the hello world of HTML. And I've got my GitHub profile open here. I didn't really plan myself. If you want to find me, Twitter, Twitch, I'm a wannabe streamer. I mean, it says I am a streamer. I'll prefix it with wannabe. And let's just start off with creating our first page. So we're going to start off with a new repo. And for this one, we are going to do GitHub Pages. We're going to do a simple HTML example. Name this public or initialize the README. I'm not adding any Git signals, so don't shout at me because I'm not going to open this and show you anything. I'll do everything from the browser. There we go. So I've got this page with this README here. Pay attention to this. This is just the repo name. It's GitHub-Pages. And for me to enable GitHub Pages, I'm going to go to the settings for this repo here. Then my internet permission. I'll scroll down a bit, skip all that. And then we've got this section here with GitHub Pages. And it's pretty self-descriptive. And for this first demo, we're going to do bare minimum to just get a page up You're going to click here. You're going to say the source for our GitHub page. We have to look for these static files. Is the master branch for now. But there are other options here. So if you want to follow some branching strategy or standard repo layout, you could have a dedicated docs branch or dedicated GitHub Pages branch, or there are some more complex workflows where within the action, when someone pushes to develop, if they've made changes to a specific folder, you can build the page and then publish that out into another branch and then sort of trigger all the automated flows. But for now, we're just going to do master branch. Going to hit that, it's going to refresh. Give it a couple of seconds, go down, and it's given me a URL. So it's saying your site is ready to be published at this URL. If I go there, give it a, so the first time you go, you'd see a 4 and 4. Because what's happening behind the scenes now is GitHub's already wired up this domain for you and giving you a nice name, but they're also doing builds behind the scene, generating the HTML. And if we're lucky, I refresh now, a couple of tries, we might come back to this because the initial setup does take a while. Okay, I'll come back to this. So what it's doing there is it's setting up the site and it's deploying it. And by default, what the action behind the scenes does is it looks for a file named index, and it can be index.md or index.html. And if that doesn't exist, it defaults to this README file. So if you've already got a decent README file that's done in markup, when you enable GitHub Pages, it will automatically just display that. And I'm not being very lucky with the bold agents behind us because I want to show the README file running, but I'll get back to that in a later demo. What I'm going to do now is actually add some HTML here. Because I want to show off my fancy web dev skills. I'm going to do index.html, and I'm going to copy and paste because I'm not going to risk typing this code incorrectly because, like I said, it's some insane web dev skills. I'm going to do an HTML tag, body, h1, and within that way, I'll say welcome to GitHub Pages. I'm pretty chuffed about this. I think that looks good. And I'm just going to go ahead and implement that. And I've got this, and hopefully it's already started the cogs turning behind the scenes for my page, and it's planning the deployment and getting that ready. Hope is, there we go. So this is now my store, my README. If you remember correctly, that's just the name of my repo. And hopefully this was definitely a lot faster before. I guess everyone in other time zones in America and so on are waking up, so they put in a bit of load on this. So that's going to take a while. But what I can do is, seeing that I've got a few demos that I can go through, I'll leave that there and we'll get back to it in a bit.
What happens if you just clear your cache?
Do that. I didn't see my keyboard as it's used in the shortcut for hard reload. But let me do this way here. It wasn't my cache, but it was definitely just the actions behind the scene during the deployment. So there you see, that's my amazing HTML that I did there. And that was all live. So if you don't believe me at this point that I added that index file and it got deployed here, hopefully the next few demos convince you how easy this is. So the next one I want to do is using some of the templates. So there's quite a few templates that we have supplied for us, and it's using Jekyll behind the scenes to generate the static content. So again, brand new repo. Hopefully this time I type a bit better. Pages, and this one is going to use same story here. I'll initialize the README. It has something to publish when I immediately activate it. Give it a couple of seconds. We go in the same place, go to settings, and we're going to scroll all the way down here to Github Pages, master branch, and then that immediately is from this, which is the 404, which is what we expect. And this time I'm going to hit the theme chooser, because out of the box now, it gives me all these options with these themes that give me a bunch of functionalities. So things like some of these are block templates or just news templates where you can post something like updates or releases, release information, and these support Markdown as well. So this came in theme here. It's very clean, responsive theme for Github Pages. And here are some examples of how it works or the features it has. It's pretty cool. This is looks like pretty standard Markdown stuff. I'm going to select this one. And as you can see here, where I'm using this template, it goes ahead and modifies this README for us. And this is pretty much just stock standard Markdown. You've got two headers, you can do lists, numbered lists. There's an example somewhere here for code, if I remember correctly. There's code there with the backtick. So there's a bunch of options. Everything you're familiar with is available in pretty much standard Markdown. You can do tables and so on. With that, chances are by now, this is loaded. Oh, this time it's really quick. Is with that. So that's now my GitHub page, the template. And if you pay attention to this example here, which is where I said I wanted to demo the README situation, is in the repo, I've just got a README file and an underscore config, which I'll get to in a bit. So by default, magic behind the scenes, what to say it that way, is like, okay, there's no index file. So let me just default to this README file and prove that it says, yeah, you can use the GitHub editor to maintain and improve the content. You go to the Markdown files, go here, so it's the exact same thing. So it's the same content, it's just that this is using the theme that we selected, the Cayman theme. Okay, so those are some pretty blazing demos, and this is a bad transition to a Blazor static website using GitHub Pages. I hope no one hates people for slipping that in there. So what I've done is, I don't want to redo this. There's a great article out on dev.to where I quickly find the repo. Israel, he went through all the work of setting up this template for how to deploy a Blazor. So it's sort of a more realistic scenario. If you want something slightly more complex, so you're a Microsoft house and you know how to do Blazor type development, and you want to use Blazor for this instead of potentially Angular or React or just plain HTML and CSS. So this is just a standard Blazor template, nothing too fancy. And the only real big additions is that instead of there being some magic behind the scenes where we don't really see the action workflow, we've gone ahead and configured this action workflow. But it's nothing scary, things that we shouldn't tinker with. And it's pretty much just a standard checkout. We do a standard .NET build and a publish. And the only difference here is that they're using an additional step here, which is GitHub Pages deploy. And they're pointing it to the base branch. So when dev builds, we'll do a publish and after. And you'll see that if I go into settings, I've set this up the same way, and based on that action, so we push in a code to dev, it's built in, and once our page is built, we push that into master. So this is where GitHub is monitoring for our page. I put that, and hopefully this is impressive. This is a Blazor website, also using GitHub Pages, and it's got the perfectly functional, amazing feature of a counter that go up to 10, maybe 11. It's up there, and everything you'd expect from this template. And for the most part, oh, sorry, I just remembered I skipped over that config. So that's the one thing I'm going to go back to. Is which one was it? This one. This underscore config. This is for Jekyll specifically, and there's a bunch of documentation for this. I don't want to go too much into that because that's sort of just beyond sort of an intro for GitHub Pages. But for our example, we're just selecting a theme. It's this one. I can very easily go in and change that to one of the other themes and like that, and my site will immediately change to that theme. So that's all pretty easy. But now, with a lot of these sessions, like I showed you this stuff, and it probably maybe, I'm not sure what you think, it might look impressive. It's like, oh, okay, that's pretty easy. But sure, we can come to the repos and see what I've done. But I think GitHub does a better job of this. And I stumbled upon this, I think it was last week sometime, on Twitter. I get all my quick information. Twitter is a great resource for random tech announcements and info. And they've got this GitHub, or github.com. And it's very similar to what Connie mentioned. Microsoft has Learn, MS Learn, where they cover a bunch of topics. And what I'm going to do now is for GitHub Pages specifically, I'm just going to, what's that one? It says it's a 40-minute course, but I'm going to do like a very quick whirlwind tour of this, or fly through this, just sort of as like a summary of some of the stuff that we've done, where we started with just regular HTML, then we went to Markdown, and then we went to themes. And at the end of this, it will show us using one of these themes and actually posting a blog post. What I found really impressive is the level of integration that this learning portal has. So you saw it went, it created my repo for me. I did some setup, and I'm going to just hit start here. And the way you, sort of the practical way that they teach you how to use this is pretty impressive, because they've actually gone ahead and opened an issue on the repo that they just created for me. And I'm not going to read through all of this. I'm just going to very quickly sort of highlight all the things that we've gone through. So the first step is we want to do the same thing. We've got this repo with some static content. I'm going to come into here, into GitHub Pages. You want to enable it. Then give it a couple seconds. So we've got this URL. So for what else is it asking us to do? So once that's done, we'll be ready to create a bit more content. That's done. There we go. And now you'll see it's automatically placed a comment here, which I just find that really impressive. It's a great learning experience. So now it's asking us to customize it by, in this case, instead of an index.html, we use an index.md. So we're going to go in there and make a small customization and open a pull request. So that one, it is this one here. And I am working that I'm gonna quickly save that. Obviously, I'm just gonna go with the default messages. Going into this patch branch. This sort of emulates workflow. If you were maintaining a project, no one's going to be just directly committing to the docs branch or the Github Pages branch. There's going to be some process to follow. So here I've created this merge request, and then it's telling me, giving me some details about how this all works. And everything looks good so far. So my merge request was approved. Obviously, this is not a realistic scenario where I create a merge request and I'm approving my own merge request. That's just bad practice. You shouldn't self-approve your own code. Don't trust yourself. Have other people review it. Hopefully, I'm going to merge this. And I'm just going to delete that branch for a bit of cleanliness. Cool. That was pretty easy. And so now I'm done. I'm just going to go to my next task. And you can see we're already on task 4. So step is generally pretty simple, but I would advise you to fly through this as quickly. I usually use it as the highlighting mechanism. There is some really good detail in all the text here. The next one is going to go into a bit more detail, that config file. And what you're going to see here is that we are going to use another theme, so the minimum v. So it's talking about getting our blog ready. We want to modify the _config YAML file to the minimum theme. So I'm going to quickly open that. And you can see this one has a bit more information here. So it's got things like title, email, some descriptions. But now we can hear about adding a theme. Remember correctly, but that looks good. Again, quick commit. It's going to open a branch. There'll be some validation on this. Process. Did I do something right? Okay, so it looks like we've changed the theme. That's correct. The top of the file's changed. Scroll to the bottom, the point. I'm getting notifications on my phone. Let me quickly view this website. Oh, there we go. It just took a while. There's that. Oh. Mostly. I think I may have missed something here. So let me quickly review this. So at the top of the verse, this file's changed, right? Time content to theme, which is what I've done. Scroll to the bottom of the window to put the commit. I'm not sure, maybe. Let's commit. Let's go back a bit. Let me refocus myself here. So I'm not sure why it's not doing this, because yeah, the last time I did this morning, it was just a theme change. Let's change the theme to minimum. I wonder if this is case sensitive. So I typed capital in there, didn't I? So let me quickly go to the code and change that commit again. So I'm going to quickly change my branch, my patch 1. Let's config file. And that would be a cool lesson learned live. If that is the case, commit patch. And if I come back, I actually get my pull request, make sure I'm looking at the right one. Oh, there we go. Okay, that's a cool live lesson. I guess my typing failed me there. And that scenario, I typed a capital N. I didn't realize that was case sensitive. Cool, you learn something new even in the demo. And then the last piece, which is what I was alluding to, is this minimum theme supports markdown files. It's a blog, and each post is represented by a markdown file. So that's going to be the last piece here. Is we're going to go to the code tab. In our patch branch, we're going to create a new file. I'm not going to trust my screw up again. Create a new file with that file name, and we're going to replace it with today's state. I can change the title. I'll see if I want to do that. So let's get back here. I'll open that to the new chapter so we can go back to that issue. And they requested we do it on our patch branch. So here, add new file. Something to point out here was, I'll go back here, is that they said create a new file with this underscore post / that time format -md. This automatically, as you just saw, creates the folder for me as well in Git and the file in that folder, like you see here. The date that I know we are in the year 2020. What is the date? Today is the 22nd. If David is still on the call, this is the way you format dates, by the way. The month goes into the middle. I'll just point that out. And did they ask me to do anything else in there? I'm just going to say hi for nothing too exciting. Commit that. And hopefully in a couple of seconds, there we go. Like, I'm still super impressed with this whole learning experience, because they asked me to do something, I went and did it, committed the change, immediately it went and updated the issue. And I'm just continuously learning as it goes. So the last piece for this is they want me to add a bit more detail to unblock us, so add some metadata to it. So at the very top, I'm going to add this meta values, so just the typo and the date. And it's then beyond that, the coming that matter. Cool. So they reiterate what they've said at the top here. I've left the same typo, and that looks very good. So I'm going to go back here. This file, I'm still in the right branch. Edit it. That's as you can see, have that as well. And 20 7, I think it's 2022. Looks good. Not bad. There's a little preview of my blog. There, so the GitHub plugin that is happy with this. It's a pretty easy client to please. So I'll go ahead and merge this. And then that's pretty much it. That's a very quick summary of GitHub Pages, and we get a nice picture of Octocat smiling at us. We've done a pretty good job, I think. And if the timing is good, if I refresh this, you'll see welcome to my blog. Probably that title. I've got another thing called welcome to my blog. Glad to see you here. And here's the little post I created. Called title. I think they can look like you expect to any blog. And it highlights my amazing content that I worked so hard to put out there onto the internet. So that's pretty much the end of it. And what we saw from the beginning, we started very simple HTML using regular HTML tags. You can add some CSS on top of that. Then we got onto some bit more complex stuff. We used Markdown, and then we sort of just started sort of creeping into the topic of static site generators using Jekyll and themes that is endlessly customizable. And then something that you can also do is use other front-ends frameworks, and you have to figure out how to get the static content into your GitHub repo. So we use Blazor, but you welcome to use anything like React or Angular. And that is me. Were there any questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
Ronald showed us static pages. When would you use static pages, and when would you use GitHub Pages? So
this, I've personally asked this question, and this is not an official statement from any organization. I see that you'd use static pages when, or Azure static pages, where that's when you want to do something probably a bit more extensive, where you want a bit more control, but slightly bigger application, or you've gone beyond sort of the free tier limits of GitHub Pages, because GitHub Pages doesn't have a premium tier. There's no paid for version. They give you that 100 gigs of bandwidth a month and that 1 gig of storage for you by that. And that's it. It's just a nice service that they have. So once you sort of outgrow those, and you probably got like 3 big sites, I'd say use Azure Static Web Apps.
Could we host a Blazor website inside GitHub Pages? So you just have 1 or 2 static pages and the entire app is hosted inside. Not sure why a company would go that route, but that seems viable. Like that.
More than this.
Yeah, I suppose it's done. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't see my counter. I'll go to 10. I'll go to 15 now. I'll take to the extreme. Quickly going through the questions here. Your functions, session ordered. Training link. Okay. Yeah, I think that's it. I just see what you're saying. It's got to go. Very valuable info. If that's it. I'm gonna maybe end with, yeah, I'm not gonna do any more transitions. I think I've had enough fun with this already.
No, that looks like all the questions. Yeah, we
Back
definitely
to you, Alan.
Yeah, you're really making us look bad with our OBS skills. So we all need to up our game now. But thank you very much. That was awesome. I think it's getting late now, so we can start wrapping up. Okay, I'd like to thank the speakers for the evening. The content was awesome. And I thank everyone for attending, because it's getting quite late now, and thank you for the people that's still online. There's still quite a few people, so thank you very much for attending. And also, I'd just like to remind everyone's got something that they would like to speak about, or everyone has something to say. So we have 2 sessionizers, one for Cape Town, one for Johannesburg. We don't have one for Durban, but we will divert any sessions that you would like to speak about in the Durban area. So as I say, everyone has something to say, so please submit a talk to the sessionizers. And then we're going to be moving over to our after-stream networking event. So if you have any unanswered questions, feel free to join us there. We won't be having beers, and we're not allowed to, so join us for a milkshake or tea or coffee. And if you've got any questions and things that we haven't answered, please feel free to drop by. So just to remind you what the link is it's https://acker.ms/msdug networking. And thank you again for everyone for attending, and thanks once again to the awesome speakers. Have a good night and keep safe.